Good time.
Hi, and welcome to the Metamorphosis Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Elliott, where we explore anything and everything self realization and personal transformation in my favorite way possible. And that's in connection with others, getting to hear from other people's stories and journeys, and just taking in the wisdom that's been gathered from actually fucking living life, not just knowledge and information, but like what's been experienced. And, I find so often listening to these stories of life lived, there's this resonance and there's these keys that can be picked up. And today I'm really excited because I got a really special guest. It's my best friend,
Hey.
Dr. Kevin Preston.
Oh man, it's awesome sitting on the couch with you here.
Yeah, I love this.
It's very snuggly. Very, it feels good.
Yeah, I love this. I love just give you all tuning in and listening just some background. Dr. Kevin Preston, like he is, one of the most important male human beings in my life. He is just a soul brother, and so much more than that. I find, when I reflect back, and I think it's been 8, almost 9 years we've known each other, there's just, I can't think of one conflict we've had, which is really interesting for me. There's been uncomfortable moments and places, but it's just this genuine, how I feel it in me is just this genuine love and care for you just living your best life. And I feel that reciprocate, like just the reciprocity in that and the mutual experience of that. And I feel so seen, so heard, and so understood like all the time. It's been from day one.
Mm,
And for me, it's a really, really important piece in my life and how much that's impacted my existence and how I get to show up in life. And so it's like such an honor, to have you on the show because, in our day-to-day life, we like message back and forth. We've been through so many experiences together. Kevin and I have a very interesting journey together. We kind of laugh because it's almost like we're living these parallel lives with so many similar threads that we can kind of like be like, oh, that's happening for Kev. Oh, I should pay attention. Uh-oh, like that's coming. Or yeah, that's coming. Because often we'll find ourselves sharing like, oh, you do? Like this has been with divorce. This has been with like exciting new like business breakthroughs. There's been, God, there's so many places we've had touch points of
hmm
similarity.
I'm having all these flashbacks as you're talking. Like, yeah, there's been a lot of amazing experiences, like
Uh-huh.
intense ones, awesome ones, blissful ones, really shitty ones, but we get to go through it together. And
Yeah.
that has been epically transformative for my life as well. And just, yeah, really resonate with everything that you shared. And feels like, yeah, the brotherhood is so strong and solid and keeps growing, and all these places we get to experience together even more. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's been pretty fantastic, man.
Hmm.
And here we are sitting on a couch together.
Yeah, yeah,
Epic journey.
yeah. I love it. I sent Kev a message. I'm like, oh man, I really want to have you on my podcast. Like we always have these epic, like few hours long conversations, just diving into really juicy topics. And from years ago, we would always say, like, damn, I wish this was recorded. This would make an epic podcast episode. And so, yeah, I felt inspired to actually bring him on the podcast.
Nice.
And my favorite reaction was he was like, "Yeah, great. Okay." Like instead of the Zoom link, he's like, "Okay, I'm driving out to your place." And we're a few hours away. So he like loaded up his truck, we set a date, and here he is. We get to sit beside each other and
Worth
yeah.
the drive. Yeah, just to sit on the couch with you. This is good times.
Yeah, and do what we do, just get to hang out and then tomorrow some hot springs, nature adventure, and just some fun. So
Yes.
thanks for being here. So let's dive into it. The reason I was inspired to have Kev on the show is, one of the things that I'm continually experiencing being in Kevin's life is just how like is just inspiration. I'm always inspired watching him grow and evolve as a human being. And something that I felt, everyone tuning in and listening would gain a lot of value out of is, Kevin is a manifester, and anyone who knows human design, that's actually, his profile. He's a manifester. And he really does it well. He embodies that profile in a really big way. And what I find and I've found from day one is like whatever he visions, it comes to fruition. Like it happens. Like it could be the most outrageous idea. And like I'm like, yeah, that I can't wait for the day where you call me. And it's like that happened. And it's always happening. And I feel like there's so much value in sharing like what I'm really wanting to hear because there's parts that I know a lot of Kev's journey and there's a lot that I don't know. And so I really wanted to have him on and just like kind of dive back into his journey, before we met and just kind of hear from him kind of some of the milestones, like where he came from. I'll touch it here, but I'm sure he'll share deeper here. It's like this kid from Alberta. And now, when you look into his life of where he's at now, he's this empowered man who's, I judge, is really connected to his vision, to his mission. He's here serving humanity, so clear in what his gifts are, and unapologetically brings them to the world, just day in, day out, like a man of service. And I come across a lot of men out there, and if women are tuning in, like I'm sure you can relate in your own way too. Like so many people still trying to, discover the clarity of those gifts or that purpose or the mission and kind of have it figured out, but wanting to refine it even more.
Mhm.
And what I've found with Kev is it's like so dialed, so aligned. And what I watch in Kev is this theme of deeply attuning to his body and his system and giving it what it needs, tending it, nurturing it so that he can be this clear vessel. This is how I experience him anyways. Clear the vessel so that the guidance that comes in and the clarity of where to go and who to connect with is just, it's like that radio station. It's dialed, it's right
Mhm.
on that key point. And my imagining is it wasn't always that way. And so I wanted to have you on the show to just like hear, like kind of explore the behind the scenes of Kev's life, like, and where this all started back in Alberta. Like, like, tell us more of like where you came from. Can you maybe set the stage of a bit of your childhood, like how you grew up, siblings, all that? And then, like, how did you get from there over in farm country to, now, God, so many things. You run a clinic full of a bunch of body workers. You're running like really, incredible life-changing events. The New Human event, where there's been a couple of them already, and another one coming up. And you've led all kinds of retreats, and you do container work with people. And there's just so much healing. There's always so much happening. Being guests on other podcasts, and so like take us back like before
Mhm.
this present version of Kevin, like how did you get here? Maybe, yeah, I'll ask some questions in there, but just maybe let's start off with just setting us to give us the stage of where did Kev come from?
Once upon a time.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thanks.
yeah.
Yeah. Happy to be here. And I knew when I was younger somehow without having really like the external circumstances reflecting, but it was a feeling. I'm curious if you felt this, but
Mm,
I knew I was supposed to do something important.
mm,
And I remember having that feeling in my body, maybe 8 or 9 years old, 10, like something like
mm,
that. And I think I felt it in my system sometimes as like frustration or
mm,
like having a deep knowing, but not really knowing what that was, just in there somewhere. And so I spent a lot of time in the forest, a lot of time with animals. We had a little farm, yeah, outside, like 24/7. It was the best. I was a pro fort builder. That was my first trades ticket, bushcraft, and hunting and fishing and just, yeah, a lot of time outdoors. And I have three siblings. So there's four of us kids. We're all pretty close in age. And so really grateful to my siblings. I got two younger brothers, older sister, and we did a lot together, lots and lots of sports outside, and get into trouble once in a while, I suppose, and stitches and, various shenanigans that happen growing up that way, dirt bikes and two tremendous parents, and both of them gifts, that were shared in their own ways, patience, hard work, perseverance, getting things done, but never too harsh either,
Mm,
there was like softness and gentleness there and room to grow and room to explore. And I think for me, well before I knew what human design was and even like what a manifester is,
mm,
one of the videos I'd seen of Ra, the guy that channeled human design, was like, parenting manifestors could be really difficult. And
mm,
I remember seeing that video and being like, wow, it probably was hard to parent me because I would ask a lot of questions, probably push boundaries a little bit, explore, and always having different ideas or different things like streaming through me all the time, but without really a clear plan, or I would need to try things. And one of the things you said earlier, the vision I got was, yeah, it wasn't always this way.
mm,
And, I've met different people in my life along the way. And, sometimes they do share, you're just so calm and regulated and clear and like a lot of the things that you said, and that is not how I would describe myself, especially in the past. Now more so, yes. And I have lots of moments where, letting go of the wheel a little bit and stuff gets bumpy and sloppy and a little bit messy while I'm going through another growth phase or I'm learning something new. And so we used to go sledding all the time, tobogganing as kids, and that's the image that came up as you're talking about that. Is, you get to the bottom, you run a track down, and then you hike back up again, and maybe you get better, maybe you get faster, you refine things, you find how to get down with more style, more efficiency, more flavor, and sometimes you wipe out, and then you just turn around and haul your sled back to the top again. And so I think it's been a continued process over and over and over again, fairly relentlessly, I would say. And that's also something I'm just reflecting on in this moment of what you've
mm,
shared too, that I didn't really see myself as a really like consistent person or special qualities or characteristics, but I do just keep going at things, I suppose, and there's a bit of tenacity there. And I would say now, more grit than what there used to be too, because I do feel like I'm called or pulled in a direction to be of service and make impact, whether that's my astrology or human design or gene keys. I don't know. It's just, it feels like what I'm here to do. And the more I step in that direction, the more clear it gets. And then I'll come to a plateau, or I'll come to a phase where it gets really cloudy and I experience confusion. And then the work begins on what is that? And so I think I kind of did that actually all through childhood, maybe teen years, of trying things. Some stuff worked, some stuff didn't. Did a lot of different jobs growing up. I worked on a lot of farms all in the area that I lived, and I loved it because I was outside working with animals, doing like physical things. And I think that was the other part that was really healthy, is certainly being in nature, but processing a lot of emotion that I didn't even know I was feeling, and
mm,
maybe hadn't had conscious awareness that I'm a bit of a feeling machine, feel very deeply, intensely at times, and I would need to naturally move that energy without understanding it fully. But I often felt drawn to, yeah, physical jobs, like physical labor jobs, digging holes, digging ditches, building things, whatever I could do, chasing, cattle, chasing buffalo, or having them chase me at times. Our neighbors had bison on their farm, and that was exciting. I liked it. It's a little adrenaline rush once in a while until I got chased a couple times, and luckily I was fast. I was in track and field. Yeah, big heartbeats once in a while with livestock, but so grateful for so many of those experiences of being able to grow up in a community where neighbors all helped themselves.
mm,
They helped each other. If somebody
mm,
showed up, you would just go and, help them build something, pull something out, deliver calves,
mm,
any number of things, and you just did it. And so there's a lot of
mm,
love in our community with a lot of the different families and kids running around. And I remember my dad pulling us on a snow machine, and there was two toboggans hooked up and eight kids.
Whoa.
neighbor kids over there too, and we'd tie more toboggans on, and that old school snow machine would just keep on running us around. Probably look pretty funny, but I just have so many fond memories of that, and so I feel like, yeah, childhood was eventful at times, but yeah, such a gift because I know a lot of people don't always experience tons of gifts as kids, and then we get to discern as adults how we want to carry on our patterning. And I've always been a really curious person. I like understanding things, and I'll read a lot and try and learn from anybody that I feel a resonance to learn from, and with no limits to that. So here we are, went the science route in school for a while, and then yeah, I wrecked my knee a bunch of times playing hockey and had acupuncture eventually, and it worked amazing. And I think that curious part of me just needed to understand, what is that and why did that work so well. I hadn't been familiar with it at all. We didn't grow up with any kind of Eastern medicine philosophy or anything like that, so it was the leap of faith, the solo journey of, I feel like I need to follow that. I don't know why. I'm going to, and we'll see what happens. And yeah, never really planned on doing the Doctor of Chinese Medicine program. That's what happened. Didn't really foresee or plan to, become a deep level thinker in toxicity and viruses and bacteria and parasites and all these good things that I do testing for nowadays in my clinic and have for a long time, and acupuncture and just all these things that were really unknown to me, but it feels like they all got awakened in the body and
Mhm.
awakened in my psyche and spirit over time. And it just felt very natural with each stage that would be revealed. Then it would just emerge a little bit at a time, and then I'd follow the next thing and see what's around the next corner here without really knowing. And yeah, what an adventure.
So when you were getting your knee treated, what was the first pivot? Like what was the first direction towards like exploring that deeper? Like when you said like, oh, like how did that happen? How did that work? Like what was step one from there?
I do have an image of looking down at my knee with a bunch of acupuncture needles in it.
Yeah.
And after like 20 minutes, it wasn't as swollen.
Mm,
And this was like 2 weeks post surgery, one of the surgeries I'd had. And it was just odd because I saw it to start with, and I knew how swollen it was, and it was super painful.
mm,
And then it just started feeling better in that treatment in like real time. And so I kind of sit up and I look at my knee, probably confused look on my face. Oh, I can see my kneecap again. Like the swelling has come
mm,
down a lot, and I've just been laying here with needles. Like, what is that?
mm,
How is that happening? And it just felt relieved, and it just
mhm,
felt better. And every time I'd get treatment, it just kept feeling better. So that interesting kind of intersection is like, I have no idea what this is. I know that it's working. Now my mind's engaged. What is it? How does it work? I got to understand this a little bit more. Started reading books on Chinese medicine, and
mm,
that just kept deepening because it was like finding a world that I had no idea existed.
mhm,
It was like Narnia or something. You go into the forest and suddenly there's a whole other world through the back of the wardrobe. And I was like, what the hell?
mhm,
I've never even heard of this stuff. Like, how has this been around for thousands of years and millions of people have gotten treatment? What else is here that I don't understand? And it was almost a little bit destabilizing because I had no bearing for it
mm,
other than my own experience, and then reading more books. And
mhm,
one book led to another. And pretty soon, I don't know, half a dozen books later, I felt that I got to change directions here
mhm,
and gonna take a fork in the road and move to Vancouver, go to Chinese medicine school. Didn't really know what I was getting into, and it was very overwhelming once I got there. And so much new information coming in that I couldn't really place. Like I had no content or context for it, and it just took time of studying, listening, studying, listening. Finally some stuff would kind of seep in there, and things would click in a little bit because there's a completely different operating system to view the body,
mhm,
which also was fascinating to me, but so foreign at the time. And then it started, becoming more understandable, and I could start to relate to it and make different connections and connecting the dots here and there. And once I got into it, probably as like second year maybe of the 5 year program, some things really dropped in, and then I finally felt like, oh, this this makes sense to me. I know this somehow.
Mhm.
Now I need to just keep going further, and fell in love with herbal medicine and all the specialty aspects of Chinese medicine. And that was that, it just kept rolling, and then took every course I could get my hands on after I graduated, and trained in anything I could think of every weekend, another course, another course, another course, because I just wanted to know more. Then I was like
Mhm.
a starved animal, like I couldn't get
Mhm.
enough of that information coming in. It felt so refreshing to just keep learning something new.
Mhm. And when you were a kid, when you were a kid and you look back to your early childhood, like, is there any thread or theme of like you doing that type of treatment or working with people in that capacity that was like when you now reflect back, are there
Mm.
any signs or signals that showed that interest to treat people, to work with the body, to want to like support evolution of humanity? Like, do you notice
Mm.
any?
Yeah, I think that animals actually,
Mhm.
because there was a time I thought I'd go into vet medicine.
Mhm.
And I think it was just I was around animals all the time, um, pulling calves at the neighbor's place, or doing C-sections, helping out with local veterinarians, and working with them, and seeing like the real inner workings, literally sometimes,
Mhm.
of cattle, or yeah, other animals. And I felt this really deep desire to help all the time.
Uh,
Like I really just wanted to help. And animals I felt like were easy to help, because if they had a broken leg, or they were cut open, or you could really be of assistance in that way. Or if a calf was stuck, if you could help, then you could see the impact and the effect right away.
mhm.
And I think partly being in lots of clinics growing up, and going to the doctor, I had lots of ear infections and strep throat and all these other things that a lot of people experience. And so I was at the doctor's office a lot. And then I was also at physio clinics a lot, or getting some kind of rehab treatment with injuries, shoulder injuries, like hockey and sports and everything else. So, kind of being steeped in aspects of healing modalities, I think
Mm,
just being in proximity, and then in my day to day life, like being around animals, and, we had chickens and puppies and goats and all. I just loved being outside around animals. So, it seemed like a natural fit to maybe go that direction. But yeah, somehow I got swung over to the people side. I think just my fascinating with anatomy and physiology, and how the body works, and some of the courses I took in college when I started on the brain and biomechanics and all these things like that. The body is fascinating. I gotta learn more. I gotta go in this direction further.
mhm. And I'm curious when you go back to like early Kev's phase in your like childhood, were there any like big moments? Because I can hear there was the community support, there was so much like care and connection in so many ways. Were there any like big challenges where like the outside world or the conditioned world reflected back to you to like not bring your gifts to the world, or like any challenges when you look back of like, oh, that was really hard to like discover who I was because of this thing, or
Mm.
the so and so said that, or a teacher, or was it pretty fostered in like love and care and support?
Lots of lots of love and care for sure.
Hmm.
And probably more just in contemplation, looking back, done lots of self-discovery work over the years, and you and I talk about a ton of that sort of element is, and I'm sure a lot of people resonate with this too. Like I never really felt like I fit in anywhere,
Hmm.
and like I played hockey, but I didn't really feel like a jock per se, and
Hmm.
also loved science and biology, but I wasn't really in the academic like crowd as much either. And so I always felt like I was in between everything. And I'd go to parties, but I didn't really like going to parties actually very much. But I would go because if you didn't go, then maybe you'd get made fun of, or something, like, what's the matter with you? Why aren't you coming out to party and drinking these things? And I just never really felt drawn to it, but I would. And then a lot of the other times I would just stay at home because I didn't feel like I wanted to go. So I often felt like kind of stuck and a little bit lost, and then really deeply feeling things. And I had no idea back then. It was just my own experience of how sensitive I was to people's thoughts, ideas, moods, feelings, a huge amount of intuition. But I didn't even know what intuition was.
Mm-hmm.
I just was like, well, this is how everybody, must feel. And it turns out, of course, we all have our own experience. So I didn't think that was unique or unusual. I just felt like overwhelmed by my feelings a lot. And then I think just naturally that desire to go into the forests and spend a lot of time alone, move my body, throw rocks, sticks, build something all day long. And yeah, I think that was one of the bigger challenges. And then probably around 12, 13 years old, whether it was like hormone related or whatever, the growth and development, feeling really like sad and angry inside, but not really sure like what that even was. Just feeling like deep frustration, but not really having the skill set to communicate that properly. And, great household and things, but I also feel like nobody really got taught in earlier lineages too how to interface with emotions,
Mm-hmm.
how to speak about them. I think my parents did a great job and they did the best that they could with what they were taught, which was likely very little. And so they taught me a lot of things that I could really use. And I often felt like I couldn't really speak or communicate in the way that I wanted to, or I knew there was more, but I couldn't. And then I would ask questions all the time. And then a lot of times I think I probably stopped asking questions, depending on the responses you get from, teachers or other, peers and things like that. Then you just ask them internally after a little while, or maybe shut down some of those aspects and try and fit in wherever you can with
Mm-hmm.
that feeling. And, knowing what I know now, working with thousands of patients, I think so many humans feel like they never really fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you actually knew if there's like a little bubble above everybody's
Mm-hmm.
head, especially in school age, you would see like so much confusion, so much emotionality, overwhelm, grief, like all these different things. And I remember having some pretty dark thoughts around that time, 12, 13 years old, that were really challenging to work through, but I never told anybody because
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of my thing. Severe injuries at times, and then I wouldn't tell anybody and I would hide it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, tearing muscle off my shoulder,
Oof.
having bad wipeout, and I didn't tell a soul. I couldn't move my arm for months, but I faked my way through. And it wasn't until I was a little bit older and was working out and getting like actual shoulder muscle and realizing like there's this huge divot on my shoulder. And then I had the memory of like the wipeout of what happened, getting kind of thrown out of a trailer behind a ATV on a gravel road and get a face full of dirt and chip my teeth and all kinds of things. And my shoulder hurt so badly. But I think probably I didn't want to get in trouble and just went to it. And so I've seen that pattern in my life a lot over the
Mm-hmm.
time of, becoming an adult too, of we're just going to hide the feelings, hide the things. And I know this is true for a lot of guys as well, a lot of humans, but yeah, it's interesting how things like kind of shape us and then it brings it back so that we can work on it more, whatever that is.
What's the belief you'd say that's in there? What was the belief for
Mm,
that version of Kev that was like, oh, fucked up your shoulder, but not gonna say anything? Like, what would be at the root of the fear, do you think?
Probably not wanting to be a burden,
Mm,
not wanting to rock the boat.
mm,
And I think you and I share this. We've done work with a mutual friend of ours, and we kind of categorize the energy centers and tendencies in the body.
mm-hmm,
And my first energy center is truth,
mm-hmm,
and then the second one is solar plexus, like peace, order, harmony, balance. And so I think a lot of times I would put harmony ahead of what was true for me. Like
mm,
I'm in so much pain I can't move my arm. I think it's broken or something severely wrong. But the desire for harmony and not rocking the boat would supersede that. And then it's like, hey, are you okay? Yep. Yeah. So there's the untruth, but doing that to create harmony because
mm-hmm,
then I'm not going to maybe get attention that I don't want, even though I need some attention
mm-hmm,
on this thing that this probably needs to have a surgical intervention or something, but
mm-hmm,
some fear probably around sharing what was happening because I don't really recall, and I really appreciate my dad for this because I saw this in other dads of friends that I knew were pretty harsh sometimes.
mm-hmm.
And so you would literally be afraid to share or say or do anything that might get you in shit.
Yeah.
So I don't really recall that. I think my dad had a lot of patience and a lot of care, but I think it was just that pattern in me just developed more and more to shut those aspects down. Even if I really needed something, then I'm good. I'm just going to become hyper independent. And
Um,
I think these things kind of sometimes begin in utero or family history,
mhm,
ancestry, where these patterns were already well developed, and then we get to carry on with it if we choose to. And
totally.
I carried that pattern for a long time, and I still have a tendency once in a while to become really hyper independent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The language I like to put here, I'm not saying this is true for you, but the adaptive child. It's like where there's this big event where in an ideal situation, mom and dad come in and like attune to that event happening and like give all of what would really be needed. The emotional space held to process that, the physical tending and all those things. And if it's not available,
Mm-hmm.
adaptation, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I got this. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll take care of this. I got
Yeah.
this. I'll figure it out. Don't
Yeah.
want to be a burden, which it's like, yeah, I'm curious when you hear that if that feels true. Like that.
Yeah, that does. I can, feel that energy shift through my body. And I just had an insight. I've had these insights before. And I
Hmm.
say this with so much love and care and compassion that, four kids, all really close in age. And I felt like my mom did a great job. And there was a lot of overwhelm there with a lot of the things that she went through as a kid herself, and a lot of trauma and a
Yeah.
lot of difficulty. And I haven't ever really spoken about this too much in a public aspect. So, mom, when you listen to this, if that happens, like I do say it with so much love
Yeah.
because of what I've learned, that I think I was sensitive enough and intuitive enough, and I think most kids are, that I could sense like she's full, like her cup
Hmm.
is full. If I add any extra emotionality to this cup, like it's not going to be good for her or for any of us, my siblings too.
Hmm.
So then I think it's like, actually, I'll just hold on to this because there's so much energy here that hasn't been processed. And of course, I wouldn't have cognitively known that at the time, but the behavior shows up.
Hmm.
So then it's like, oh, I'm going to cultivate that. I'm just going to try and address whatever I can on my own all the time. Again, not consciously, the pattern just begins. And then those
Hmm.
patterns, as we know, you and I both work with
Hmm.
clients and coaching and all kinds of things. And you can see these patterns just, of course, it would be like that. And it's nobody's fault. And that's why I say I have so much compassion, because I know some of the content of things that she experienced and lots that I don't know, but I could feel it.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh no, there's plenty there. I don't want to rock the boat because I just want harmony all the time. It's easier for me to actually just have an immobilized like shoulder that has muscle torn off it and just sit
Yeah.
there at the table and breathe and pretend I'm okay.
Yeah, I think you just named a perfect, like a really beautiful, important piece there. And it's like you could feel it. And you talked about intuition there as a kid and like didn't really know what it was, but it was available. Like that attunement of, oh, the emotional availability in the field just isn't there.
Hmm.
And so while I'm gonna, I'll retract whatever that need is then, and I'll take care of this myself. And I want to speak to this here because it's like what I find, and this is why I love having these conversations. I think these are the important, uncomfortable conversations to have that need to come into the light more. Is this talking about what happened or what was or wasn't available as a kid? This isn't to shame or blame any of our parents or grandparents or anything, but
Hmm.
it's to talk about it. This is the part that didn't happen for so many families of like what was going on, what were the human limitations, what were the experiences that happened before, this family unit that does, limit
Hmm.
what is actually available. Because what I come across time and time again working with my clients, and I want to weave this in with how you support your clients um on all levels, like physically, spiritually, but I want to go into the physical system here a little bit, because how I notice it is like when there are these big events and that intuition that is there, like you named it. I know that that experience in myself of like I could feel what could be held or couldn't in my body, like
Yeah.
that intuitively I could feel I can't bring this emotion or verbalize this truth I have to mom and dad, Like they can't hold that. And this is no judgment of my mom and dad. And, Kev, is such a loving, compassionate, considerate human. I want to lay this out. Any of us having these conversations, talking about what mom or dad did or did not do, it's like nothing's wrong with them. They're not a bad person. They're
Yeah.
not bad parents. It doesn't make them bad. It's like like God, if we took the perspective out large enough, yeah, like what were the available resources at that time through an industrial revolution, the conditioning from society and government and organizations is like stripping of power. So of course, of course there would be overwhelm in the system, so much love and compassion. And it's also really important to look at the data points emotionally,
Yeah.
spiritually, physically of like what was actually going on. Because if what was needed wasn't there, it still needs to be met at some point.
Yeah,
It,
we're gonna source that somehow.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like how I want to weave this into the physical body is, clients that I usually support, it's usually on the emotional side. And what I find, like I'm taking one of Kev's remedies. He makes these incredible remedies that, he does this testing and he like goes through all the meridians and I won't go right into it, but he reads my system, my physical system and feels where there's been a lack of some sort of support or there's been some intrusion of a parasite or toxins or metals or like God in my journey, lots of drugs, self-induced and just where I came from a drug addicted mother. Those are all impacting my system. There is a lack of vitality available when there's these ingredients in my system.
Mhm.
And what I find is like taking one of Kev's remedies is it can go in there, and how I would relate this back to this emotional piece. It'd be like when you tore this muscle off your shoulder and you're not saying anything. It's like something's going to need to come in there and like tend it and support it and like emotionally hold like that event so you can integrate. And in the physical system, it's like the same thing. If a parasite comes in, someone's got to go in and attune. And this is Kev, comes in and attunes to the system. Fuck, there's this thing going on. We need to tend that to bring everything back into balance and harmony. So I'm curious just to hear, just touching this thread of like these events that happen, um, where something was needed but's missing. Like, how
Mhm.
do you notice this in, the people you've treated over the years? And how much does it tie in, like what's going on in the physical system? How much does it tie into like what was missing maybe from mom and dad,
Yeah.
growing up? Like or
It,
do you notice those
yeah, it feels
ties?
like everything ties in.
Yeah.
And even just to kind of complete the loop of a few minutes ago, I also have the insight now too that I think with what I shared with my mom, like me feeling I can't bring anything more into this space because there's so much emotion in this field already that it may not be able to support more and that I wouldn't want to create a
Mm.
burden,
Oof.
but I imagine for her that might have been the same, that she was holding so much of
Mhm.
like I can't unload any of this or speak to any of this because I don't want to overwhelm my kids. I just have to hold this and keep moving through. And so what I've learned in my life in relationships and things too, and even with you and I, is that when there's something really strong in the field, it actually creates more disturbance when it's not named or talked about. But so many of us did not
Totally.
get skill sets because that was the pattern from generations back everywhere.
Mhm.
How many times people's like with kids are seen and not heard,
Yeah.
and all of these different sort of maxims that weren't really healthy, but this was like the old school way is you don't complain, sit down and shut up and kind of do what you need to do. And
Men
again,
don't cry.
yeah, men don't cry. Like there's a million different part of these sayings, but in family systems going back generations, is so many things weren't talked about
Yeah,
because, oh, we can't talk about that family member because it'll bring shame on our family.
that's right.
Or we can't speak about this because that wasn't actually good. And so we're gonna hide that and cover that up. And so I think it came by it honestly, through the lineage of like a hiding energy.
Yeah.
And then everybody kind of goes into separation that we're all actually holding so much fucking emotion that can be felt readily, but not really moved or alchemized or dealt with because none of us maybe knew how to do that. Or we knew how to do that maybe in some ways, but a lot of it would get danced around and never really kind of like piercing the heart of some of these things. So to use my own example for my own
Mm-hmm.
body,
Mm-hmm.
tons of strep throat as a kid. I had throat infections all the time and
Uh,
ear infections all the time. What I've
Interesting.
learned now is like I couldn't speak
Yeah,
what I needed to.
that's right.
And I also would block out probably the inner guidance of my own intuition of what was needed for me.
Yeah.
So then I would block that too. So blocked throat, blocked ears, then you're in a kind of coping survivalistic like state that just recurs all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's really interesting, actually, I'm just having this insight right now.
Yeah.
My voice has changed quite a bit in the last, maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe more,
Mm.
because people comment on my voice quite a bit. I know they do for you too, because you
Yeah.
have such a sexy voice, Mike.
You as well. And it's a funny how often people just say we sound the same.
Yeah, you can. If you're not watching this on video, who's talking? But now that I understand, part of the somatics is I speak my truth way more.
Yeah.
I've worked on these patterns a lot and I'm still going to continue to do that, but I have a much easier time now through a lot of work to express my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, how I feel about a given scenario. And I'm way better at listening to what somebody else might share. So
Yeah.
I don't really get sore throats anymore.
Yeah.
Even if everybody around me are like, I got strep throat. And I'm like, if I'm looking after my body, I'm good.
Yeah.
And if I do get it, then it's a sign of like, here's a new layer. What am I not speaking to? What's not, being opened and available here? So this is also what I've seen in the clinic over the years, talk about parasites and these things that are really trending right now. Everybody's
Mhm.
doing parasite cleanses. And one of the things that I became aware of through that practice was if you're allowing parasitic energy to really be involved in your life because maybe your boundaries aren't very good, think of it physiologically. If
Yeah.
you have no boundaries, you don't have any boundaries to bacterial infiltration, parasites, and all these other things that want to actually take your energy.
Yeah.
And they don't mean anything by it. They're just in their survival mode too. Like parasites aren't like sitting there waiting, oh, that guy. I'm
Mhm.
gonna I'm gonna really strip all his minerals and resources from his body. It's the energetic imprint. So if our bodies are available with lack of boundary, things will fill that. Nature fills those spaces always to keep
Mhm.
balance. So even in my own experience, I remember, testing for toxins all the time and never finding any parasites. And it wasn't until I actually started addressing the imbalanced energy and interactions I was having in my life where I was enabling so much energy leakage in my own experience. And again, not blaming or shaming anybody that I was connecting with at that time, that
Mhm.
it felt like they were taking a lot of energy from me,
Yeah.
but I was readily giving it. So
Mhm.
yeah, here's tons of energy for everyone except
Yeah.
for me. So then when I started addressing that at a deeper level, not only did my voice change, I finally was able to track down parasites in my system that had probably been there for 30 years. And then I cleared them quickly because my body's like, oh, we're not doing that pattern anymore, or at least not to this degree. We don't need this stuff. Let's clear it away. So I always find a counterpoint between bacteria, infections, viruses, parasites, that there's some aspect of the energetic self that is in resonance with parasitic activity, as an example. And so I've had calls with patients and some of my coaching clients and things where they're not even on a parasite cleanse that I've given them. And after the call, within 24 hours, they're clearing things and getting, visual confirmation. And like, what's going on? You didn't even give me a remedy. But the remedy was in the uncovering of an old pattern that they were having.
Yeah.
And then they shift through it. And their body's like, oh, yeah, time to clear this off. We're not doing that anymore. And it's powerful. Like the body's so intelligent.
Which is so interesting how much that ties into, the generational kind of pattern that you had named of like there's a line of hiding. So it's interesting until like
Mm-hmm.
doing that personal work, the emotional work, the spiritual work of, wanting to look at that you could even find where the parasites were hiding. It's like how
Yeah.
strong the pattern is in the actual physiology also.
Oh
Like that's
man.
fascinating.
Even in the clinic this week, it's been interesting that, a couple patients come to mind where when they sit down, they feel scared, like they're really nervous.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's because I'm some overwhelming person that's, intimidating in any way in that way, but I believe they can feel what I've cultivated in my system and then my ability to illuminate what's in their system.
Yeah.
And that hiding energy, I can really compassionately respect because I have that too.
Mhm.
Oh no, they're going to see me. They're going to see my stuff. They're going to see there's all kinds of stuff in here mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And that's what I'm there to do is to help illuminate that. But there can be that slight bit of resistance or fear is, gosh, what are we going to find in here? And I think this is maybe why the society that we live in at large, although it's changing, I'm seeing big changes, typically, historically, haven't really wanted to go hunting for that
Yeah.
because you don't know what you're going to find in there. And it might not be very good. And it might be pretty dark and it might be pretty shadowy and really challenging to then address what you find. Because if you find something, now you got to face that. Or maybe you don't. You see it. And how many, I've experienced this myself too, that I see a pattern or it's illuminated for me through somebody else in my circle and it's uncomfortable because I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
And I think this is maybe one of the beautiful attributes that you and I have cultivated is
Mhm.
we can be that way for each other of like, hey man, I'm gonna I'm gonna bring this thing forward. It might not feel good, but here's something I'm observing and seeing. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, that feels like shit.
Yeah.
And thank you. I love you. Thank you. But like genuinely
Yes.
appreciating it is, gosh, I couldn't see that for
Yeah.
myself. I
Yeah.
didn't have the outside view looking in. So I have the outside view looking in on my patients, and that's maybe even easier as we can, right? You can sometimes see things for others way easier than what you can see for yourself. And
Mhm.
often then there's a mirror of like, oh yeah, that's happening in me too. Okay,
Yeah.
let's illuminate that and let's shine a light on both all the little critters that are in people's bodies sometimes, but the energy associated to it, which is maybe even more important.
Oh my God. And just what you're touching on there too, just the interdependence of being human. We need mirrors and reflections on all levels, you know, like emotionally, pattern wise, like all of it. Like if there isn't a mirror, and this is something I'm forever grateful for, and just the benefits of having a safe enough place
Hmm.
to really see all of me, like the parts that I haven't even seen yet, like please point out those blind spots. And there's been, like Kev said, there's been so many, there's been quite a few conversations where I'm like right in a struggle point. I'm like, ah, fuck. And then Kev will be like, yeah, Mike, here's that pattern again. Yeah. Do you see that? Like, remember, we've had a few conversations like, oh God, I'm doing it again. Damn it. But I'm like also so grateful. And going back to that piece around our parents and our childhood, it's like what I find because this is an important piece. It's been a game changer for me because I've watched, the people pleaser in me want to protect my mom and dad and not talk about how I
Yes.
grew up or what
Yeah.
I noticed as a really attuned, like when I look at who I am now, fuck, I have a really strong intuition. This is what helps me do really powerful work with my clients. And I know you have this too. This is why, I love, and I just got chills there. This is why I love our relationship so much is God, you get to use your intuition to like tune into me and like share things. Like, God, there's so many times I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but there's so many times I've received a message from Kev. I'm like, fuck, I'm in this tender place. And he just said everything I would have needed to hear from my dad, or like anything, like everything I would have needed to hear and have reflected back of like, actually like bringing out my gift and like reassurance and encouragement and holy shit, just the amount of health and like what comes online when I receive that. And I think a lot of people don't share and express what actually happened, circling back to this piece, like what
Yeah.
actually happened growing up in fear that that won't happen. So like when I share something vulnerably with you, inside of me, the story is like, he can't hold this. I'm terrified. Or not that you can't hold it, but the
Yeah.
place in my nervous system is like, no one's ever been able to hold what I'm about to share or feel. So this is terrifying. It's so vulnerable. And, I always reach out to Kev when I find those places in me. I'm like, I know who can hold this. Fuck, I'm terrified. I think he's going to judge me. I think he's going to not want to be friends with me. And then I bring it.
Yeah.
And then I'm always blown away. I'm like, fuck, not only was I able to do that, was he able to hold it, but he actually just shared everything I would have needed to feel and hear. And I think a lot of people where they get stuck and where they just loop is not even wanting to talk about or look at or point out anything that mom and dad did or grandpa or grandma, all those things in caretaking how what you know well, someone might have a judgment towards my mom or dad. Like if I came on here and
Yeah.
started to share all of the journey, like some of the actual events between, you know in my family unit, like I know there's going to be people that would judge that. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are so afraid to share bits of truth, you know in like to protect mom and dad's integrity.
Yeah.
And I just want to speak to that and kind of slow down in this place because it's a really important place. Because anyone that I feel like I have listened to and have felt inspired by in my healing journey, they've had the capacity to just name what was true. There's love and care and compassion for mom and dad, but there's also naming what was true and what was available and what hurt did happen. That's really important because what that does is illuminates in me as an example of like, oh, that happened to me too. Like look at this whole
Yeah.
Me Too movement that's played out you know, in our lives. Like that's because we need mirrors. We need enough safety to be like, for like you said, with your throat, like we need to be able to talk about what actually happened and understand like everyone, please, everyone hold it with love and compassion. Everyone hold everyone involved in it with like care and consideration. Like we could, take this in a bigger picture and look at like what Hitler did. Like, yeah, we could have all these judgments towards him. And if we want to evolve and learn from all like how hurt ends up hurting others,
Yeah.
like let's look at the little boy in there, how he grew up, how was he treated, what did he get from mom and dad, what was that messaging, what's up his bloodline. Like this is about learning together and holding everyone who's involved with care and kindness and not judging, but like, yeah, what led to that lack of availability? What was creating the emotional overwhelm? What was the belief in there that was so afraid to be spoken that person couldn't hold and support their kid or whatever?
Hmm.
And a theme that's been coming up in my life lately is how many people I've watched hit the end of their life and die from some sickness or illness, and then the people in their world later reflect, I'm talking specifically about examples of like, whoa, it just seemed like that person died out of nowhere. And then you go and talk to everyone who's close to them, and they're like, I think they knew. And it's like interesting how I read that is like, what, whoa, still trying to find, like, not
Hmm.
feeling enough safety to actually expose what's true in there, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, insecurities. And it's like, I'm sure you see this so much in your clinic. It's like, God, if you don't share that with someone,
Hmm.
like that's going to manifest in the body and that becomes dis-ease in the body. It impacts the flow of energy. Like, and then it's like, God, we don't have to, for so many people out there, you like with the struggles of physical ailments or weakness or autoimmune. I know you talk about lots in your feed too and support people like that's all the body wisdom is saying, hey, like something happened to me generally, like so
Yeah.
much of how we function in adult life is 95% of our subconscious programming that we got from 0 to 3. So like, let's go back there. What environment were we in? How were mom and dad feeling? God, like, how are we carrying that forward? Do you want to also stay quiet about it, not point it out? Like, someone's got to feel the shame and the embarrassment. Someone's got to feel,
Yeah.
like all of those insecurities so that love can come in and give what's needed so that that doesn't keep manifesting in those ways, whether it's creating hurt and harm to others, whether it's suicide, whether it's disease, cancer.
Well, everything that you said, I see in the clinic repeatedly.
Yeah.
And I feel like too, it's because like energy can't be created or destroyed. Like it's just there.
Uh-huh.
So if there's an obstruction in the body created through, physical trauma, emotional traumas, all the different aspects, if that energy stays stuck long enough, it manifests as some kind of issue with the system.
That's right.
And so everything starts out energetically and then on the mental emotional level. And if it's not addressed or cleared or integrated, it becomes physical. So every symptom is your body's communication network. And, some people say the check engine light comes on, we can understand that analogy. And so many people are rocking life with 4 or 5 engine lights on the vehicle. And they're like, nope, I'm going to
Yeah.
keep going.
It's a good analogy.
When, hey, even if the washer fluid's low,
Yeah.
stop and
Yeah.
top that up because
Yeah.
it's going to cause you disturbance. It could actually create some safety issues. And so with the body, we've kind of been conditioned in our society to ignore those things. And this goes back again to the hiding energy or the fear that if I did share something, and I've seen this in my, previous relationships and things that I didn't feel safe to share,
Mhm.
not always necessarily because it wasn't safe, but because I was afraid if I shared something that was upsetting, even if it was truthful for me, I would lose connection. That they would
Mhm.
pull away, they
Yeah.
would step away, they would get angry, or any number of things, anything like to lead to conflict. In the past, I would avoid that like the plague, like
Yeah.
conflict free zone. Everything's going to be harmonious all the time, no matter what. And so the amount of energy that would build up in my body would be atrocious. And then but you can, I'm saying this because I think a lot of people have this experience that there probably was experiences that they had where it actually wasn't safe to share something
Yeah.
and it could lead to, a dangerous environment or harm or something like that, so they would keep it in, and then that pattern can continue. But as adults, we get to parent ourselves if we so choose, and then we can show up in those places. And then even if I deliver something or share something that might be challenging or triggering or be hard to digest for somebody else, if I'm in my heart, I can deliver that, and it's not out of being angry or anything like that. It's just there's this thing that needs to be shared or spoken to and named. Then they have the opportunity to interface how they want with that. And I could see in the past, I wouldn't even give anybody the opportunity to work with it because I wouldn't share it anyway.
Mhm.
And then I could also have the judgment, yep, they
Yeah.
can't hold this. And it's like, well, did you say anything? Nope. I definitely didn't.
Yeah.
But I can tell that they just won't,
Yeah.
and then I have had that experience like you shared too, is like, oh, wait a minute, they did.
Yeah.
Oh, and that starts building a new pathway. But I just want to name there has been a lot, especially the past few years. If you shared something that wasn't agreed to by everybody, you could lose connection, and then that would happen. And
Yeah.
so that can
Yeah.
really deepen these patterns. And if we have connection with with ourselves at a deep enough level, because we've cultivated that internal framework, as long as there's connection here, then even if you like lose external connection, you're still connected to yourself.
Mhm.
And maybe there'll be a season where you're alone or you are rocking solo a little bit, but then you can cultivate that further and hold to what kind of frequency you want in your connections and relationships, and they'll start to show up. You just keep leaning in. So at least that's my experience, and it's been my experience with you, just
Mhm.
sharing more and sometimes being scared or sometimes like, no, I don't want to hear the
Mhm.
don't reflect. I'm actually going to avoid Mike for a few days here because I don't want to share what's happening because he's going to call me out on this stuff. So I'm just going to put the blinders on and carry on my merry way. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm doing so good right now.
Yeah.
But if we can turn and face those things, it's actually not as bad as what we make it up to be.
Which is an important piece. It's crazy how much that voice inside of in the head, that inner critic, so good at making meaning of facial expressions or like these projections that come from past experiences. Like, oh no, I know, yeah, no, they're gonna judge. They can't hold this. Like, like it's wild when there's an actual developed sense of safety with someone. It's incredible how much those stories are revealed as completely untrue. It was true, and that's important to acknowledge. Yeah, at some point for someone, whether it was in your lived experience or that's what you carry in your DNA, yeah, that was true at some point. And that's why it can be difficult. So there's so much love and compassion. There's no shame in that response of like, oh, I just like, like a way that so many people I notice where this can come up is like want to share this burning truth inside of them and share it on social media and like, start like being seen. But it's like, I can't do it. I'm so afraid. And it's like, well, yeah, totally. It's not, but like, look at humanity. Like, there's a lot of really awful things that have happened of sharing truth.
Hmm.
And we're, in a pretty privileged part of the world where it's like, kind of the worst is like getting some trolls on social media putting you down with some, cat picture and you know, shaming and blaming and it's like the more we can lean into, this is an important piece that I find is, leaning towards where there is actual a felt sense of safety and like trusting the wisdom of the body on that. And this is something, even Kevin coming into my life and, this relationship that we have prior to meeting Kevin, looking at this older phase of my life, I had a lot of men around me or a lot of people around me, and they were okay. And a lot of them didn't really have nice things to say or reflect back. And it made it really hard to discover what my gifts were to share them with the world. And what I love about what Kev shared in his journey here and that really stood out was, you know, being in this farming environment where the culture was, yeah, if, an animal goes down or a tractor goes down, it's like everyone comes in and just supports. And it's incredible when I watch your journey, and, I'm totally projecting this, but my imagining is that culture has been a template for, oh, you just keep going. Like what I hear in that is the templating that would have been from like early on is like something goes down. We just figure it out and we keep going. Even if it's like there's nuanced layers to heal and learn more about when you describe, like, yeah, okay, well, your physical tractor broke down, you fucking tore the muscle off your shoulder and you didn't say anything. But it's like still the gift of that is you kept going and like, oh, just gonna keep moving. I'll figure it out. The next layer of health would be okay, and I'm gonna bring this to someone who can help me
Yeah.
and like support this. And Kev, I've watched this time and time again in his journey is like it's almost unlimited what can be brought to Kev, and he's gonna tune in and he's gonna be curious and he's gonna want like with genuine care. Like, what is happening for you emotionally? What's happened in your life? What's happening, you know, what are you eating? Like, Kev's really good at calling those places out. Like, how are you treating your body? How have you? What are you hiding? Like, what haven't you been expressing with your doctor? Or, like, we're going to look at all those things so that the thing that's needed can start to come in so there can be more
Mm.
health and wellness. And so, looking at your journey, and I love how it's kind of, diverged into these different pieces and I feel like that's perfectly in theme with your life of like going deep on so many different places to really like get to know something. Um, what I'm curious about is, so here you've been on this journey and, we're winding here. So you go into, get your Chinese medicine um, doctorate, and this is what you start to do, and you start treating other people. What are some of the biggest themes that you've noticed in other people when you're treating them that are like preventing them from living kind of the life that I perceive you live, of like you're consistently moving forward, you're getting more and more clear and wanting to uncover some of these parts and patterns in your life that are impacting like this vision that you have? Like, it sounds like you have a big network and, these systems that come in so that you keep cleaning your vessel so that you can keep going towards your mission. What are you noticing as themes or patterns for other people when you're treating them that are in the way from that happening with that same flow?
Probably the things we don't get taught in school, or at least not yet when I was in school,
Mm,
how much the mental and emotional picture directly correlates to the physical body.
hmm
And so people come in with autoimmune conditions and any number of ailments. You know, I've kind of seen it all, lots and lots of chronic conditions and undiagnosed conditions, and sometimes really, really challenging cases. And really, in a lot of those cases, nowhere along the line has anybody correlated what they're feeling physically to anything to do with their mental emotional picture.
Uh-huh.
And that seems really clear to me, having been in the clinic for the time that I have. More people are connecting those dots now. Like there's more of
Mm.
us, you know, coaching and talking about it. And, you know, the internet's actually been really good for that, that people can attune to what is somatic therapy and
Mhm.
what is trauma work. And, oh, here's all these concepts and ideas that were never even available before or not well understood. You mean the mental emotional picture of what's happening for me in my life is creating my physical illness? And it's like, yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is. Doesn't mean the physical body doesn't need some intervention or treatment or whatever it is, but I'm way quicker now to address those things right off the bat. Whereas at the start of my career, I didn't understand it
Mm.
in the way that I understand it now. Like I had ideas, especially in Chinese medicine, they don't really separate the emotional and the physical body. It's all energy,
Mhm.
it's all organ systems. And, you know, I share this in lots of my other, you know, talks and things, how every major organ is associated with a different emotion. So, you know, when somebody comes in and they have high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, all these different things, I'm usually thinking, what's going on in the liver? The liver is often where anger is stuck from a Chinese medicine viewpoint. And so just even hearing their symptoms, and I can often feel it in their body, I'll dive in there and be like, hey, have you worked with your anger before? And often they're like, well, I'm not angry. And sometimes they say it in a really angry way because I'm
Mm.
illuminating it, but they're so used to it because it's maybe been there forever. They don't even realize it's anything different than what their system would actually like to be feeling. And then me, you know, I just traverse the terrain a little bit through conversation, through listening, and eventually we may illuminate that, oh yeah, there were some really painful events, boundaries got, you know, really disrespected, and you should have been angry, but maybe you
Mhm.
buried it because you couldn't express it because we didn't know. And then years and years later, there's some kind of liver issue or fatty liver disease or something. And they're like, I don't even drink. What's going on? I'm like, you've got a lot of stuck energy there, a lot of stuck emotion. And then as they begin to address that, guess what? The physical organ actually gets better.
Uh-huh.
And I've literally seen that thousands of times in thousands of different types of scenarios that if you don't address the mental emotional piece, you might get temporary relief, but it's not going to last. That
Mhm.
pattern will just emerge somewhere else because you haven't got the roots. And so that's probably one of the things I'm most passionate about is what's at the root here.
Yeah.
What is underneath the root of the root even, and how far can we go back? And when you start uncovering things, people go through massive transformations, like physically, but all on every level. And so I often see people change their jobs, people move, people shift, relationships, like all kinds of things. They go back to school, they go traveling, they do all kinds of things that are now actually in resonance and in alignment with what's actually real for their system as they're getting better. Because what they resonated with before that created the illness, that needs to be changed.
Yeah.
Like that was what created that. So that has to be kind of pulled apart in some way. Otherwise, you know, the ones that are really hanging on to not wanting to change because it's scary, they usually hang on to their illnesses or they don't get better. It doesn't
Mhm.
move, it doesn't shift, there's no fresh air, they're keeping the windows and the doors locked down because the fear might be so overwhelming, they can't consider that things could be different, and then they
Mhm.
don't take any steps towards creating a difference. And they might take my remedies and herbals, but every other part of them is like, "Nope, I'm not doing this," and
Yeah.
they might not even be aware of that in their system.
Mhm.
But I'll usually see it, and then I'll bring it forward, and then it can create a breakthrough, and then it does start moving.
Mhm. Would you say, God, there's a few examples that are coming up, but there's these, people who go into the other form of, the medical system and, Western medicine and then going into, let's say their cancer shows up and they go and they get the tumor cut out or they go and get chemo, but then God, the amount of stories I've heard and it's like, yep, but then a few later it comes back. Would you say that's why? Is like if the actual pattern or that that root place, whether it's like something that happened in childhood or like just whatever that root causes, if that isn't addressed, would you say that the system just that of course it's
Yeah.
going to relapse, of course it's going to come back?
Yeah. I think it's that like energy is always going to find a way to
Mm,
express itself.
mhm,
So if there's a pattern of disturbance in the body or multiple patterns, if that's not addressed, it'll just carry on.
mm,
And so in our conventional system, most of the treatment is suppression. And so it kind of goes back to what we were talking about. It's like, no, no, that symptom's coming up. You push that back in
that's
there.
right.
So it's actually the avoidance, like hiding energy in full force in our system is what is happening. So
Mhm.
most of the medications are designed to squash inflammation, squash pain. I'm not saying we don't need those at times. After knee surgery, I took some painkillers. I was
Yeah.
15 years old the first time, and that kind of pain was
Yeah.
a new experience. And I wanted those T3s.
That's right.
Knowing what I know now, I'd go about it a little bit differently. But at the time, that was a godsend to have that. So the problem is though, anything that suppresses the body and the inflammation, and everything else to a large degree will push that pattern deeper in the system, which actually makes it harder to treat and adds more layers of it because it's like geology, those layers of rock get really deep.
Mhm.
And so by the time somebody sees me, they sometimes have so many layers packed and suppressed in their body for 20, 30, 40 years because of the medications they've been on. There's so much uncovering to do to clear all that debris and toxicity that's built up in their system because it's been avoided. So
Mhm.
to me, yeah, of course the illness is going to return if the pattern is not addressed. And, I've shared this on other podcasts as well. Like, I can't even remember where I came across this in a book or something else years and years ago. Don't get rid of your pain until you understand why it's there, because
Mhm.
it is a messenger vehicle for you to look at something. And it's not easy necessarily. I get it. We don't want to be in pain. Nobody consciously just wants to be in pain all day. But
Mhm.
there's so much underneath why, especially in any chronic conditions, they need to be looked at in a new way. If you keep suppressing it, that pattern actually just continues to morph because that energy can't clear. It can't move
Mhm.
out of the system. It's not
Yeah.
getting illuminated, and it will continue to show itself in 100 different ways until it's actually addressed.
Yeah. Oof. Totally. And it's interesting how I see it is when you talk about that pain point, the language I use here is like those deep wounds. And often what I found is like almost the deeper the wound, it's like more like it actually highlights more of the potential gift and like dharma of like how that's meant to play out in the world. Like when I look at my life, if I were to rewind a few years, I wouldn't have imagined that the field I would go into is a relational expert and so supporting people relationally. But then when I actually now go back to my biggest wound is like separated from mom day one, adopted twice first year of my life, like fuck, of course I'm here to learn about relationship because my biggest pain point is in relationship. And like so for me it's like to
Mm-hmm.
tend my deepest fears and insecurities and wounds and like the pain that lives in my body is like, God, I really want to know about how, like, what makes a healthy thriving relationship so that I can support people in the places that I didn't feel like I had enough support. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
so supported in so many ways. And again, this is that place I was talking about earlier. Love for everyone who was involved in the best of what they could offer. And also, let's be real of like, if there's a limited capacity, we need to look at that. Because when these, because what motivated me from that deep wound is like, well, now I need to go seek people who've devoted their life to relationship and I can learn from everything they've gathered along the way. And then for me, what I've noticed is there it hits this point of like, whoa, my life has changed so much by being met in the place that's like where I've experienced the most amount of hurt.
Yeah.
Now my overflowing cup of reciprocity wants to be able to offer that to other people who also know the pain point of having these huge breaks and separations and being abused in relationship so that they can also heal like those places so that like, whoa, what comes from there? So many gifts. And so what I really am curious about, here you are is like at the stage of your life where you're serving so many people, themes of like vitality, and you're working with these really deep patterns and imprints in the physical system, emotional, spiritual. God, your event is the new human, like wanting to support consciousness to, look at life in new ways, understand and like, really see Kev as this connector, bridging this awareness of like, hey, everyone, what's going on in your body? Like, it does have a direct tie and relationship to your emotions. And like, they both need to be looked at and addressed and cared for. So I'm curious in this way that you're expressing life, would you say somewhere in there, is this like, does that come from like the felt sense or the pain point of living as Kev and not being tended in the way that was needed, or like not having a place to express or be met in the level of feeling and emotion that you were having as a little one? Would you say there's any possibility that that experience is what fuels the desire to offer
Mhm.
it for others?
I think, well, you and I are both into Gene Keys a bit, and they talk about it that the every shadow contains the gift,
Hmm.
and it just feels more and more true the more I understand that when I look at my life now and how I used to feel for a lot of different years, and I would say this might be news to some people that for a lot of my life I felt so alone,
Hmm.
even around other people, even it looked like I was having a good time and connecting and socializing or all those different things. But my deeper sense, and I don't even think I knew that,
Yeah.
but that was there. And it would drive all kinds of different behaviors and modifications of, creating harmony, creating connection to try and find like a salve for that pain.
Hmm.
And so over the years of uncovering lots of aspects of self, it was like, holy shit, I'd felt alone for big chunks of my life in relationships, even around other people, in rooms full of people, even with like a loving family. Like, why would that be? And then uncovering that more and then seeing a lot of my work now, it's like, it's all about connection,
Yeah.
and it's all about bringing people together and doing events and bigger events and everything else where people are hugging and connecting and having breakthroughs. And it's like the together aspect of collective healing
Yeah.
that, of course, that would be something that would be gifting of mine if I could work on that like place of pain within myself. So I think for a lot of the drive, it was unconscious.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't mean it's bad though. And so for anybody listening to this, you're wounding traumas, all these different things that sometimes alchemize into like great contributions and gifts to humanity. That's not a bad thing. It's kind of designed that way.
Yeah.
We need almost the seed or the spark that you can't get through being human without some kind of trauma or wounding.
Yeah.
That's the gift of being here, but what we do with it is up to us. And so what I've just been actually working through probably the last couple of years is being aware of that there was so much disconnect within me, which
Mm.
is why I was seeking connection so much in the external world and with other people and through relationships or with patients as well, where just connect with so many patients on such a deep level that yes, that can help get good results in healing because I'm attuning, I'm present, I'm really there.
Hmm.
But then also my own needs of deeper is like, oh, I'm the one that's needing so much connection.
Mm.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So now I have a lot more awareness of it, and it's not really coming from that shadow place in the
Yeah.
same way, that now it can actually just move into the gifting frequency of, I just want to contribute. I want to create impact because I can see how much this has helped change my life. That, of course, I don't want people to feel alone because I know what that's like.
Yeah.
So there is fuel there, but there's a
Yeah.
lot more consciousness around it of like, how can I actually like leverage that in a really healthy way in a beautiful frequency in a field of purity as much as I can as a human being with all my faults and all the other things, but that undercurrent can actually keep carrying through that, let's bring way more connection. And so I do that in my work day to day. I can see it through that lens now, bringing people back into connection with their bodies, connection
Hmm.
with their emotions, connection with their physicality, and how that is all interrelated. And then in big events and other experiences, even bigger fields of connection.
Hmm. Yeah. And for those who are listening and like, God, just you're looking at your journey and just where you've come from, farmer, being in the farm life back in Alberta to what it is that you're doing now, and like creating so much connection. This piece that you're just speaking to now of like, whoa, yeah, there was this, God, I resonate. And I wish we could see everyone who's listening to this in the show of hands of like, oh, who can relate to that place of feeling so alone growing up. And then how much that, inspires like a new way and like how to like offer connection What I'm curious about for those listening, because I've got, I get to see the behind the scenes of Kev and his life and, how you do what you do and all the pieces and the parts that are woven into the manifestation, the embodiment of all these things, events and running clinics and, all these things. I'm curious of how you, as a leader, of a man that I feel inspired by always, how do you support that part that's just true in there, where there's been that part, and I hear there's been so much healing on that, of that part that's felt alone in the world, in relationships, all these things. Like, how do you tend that human need that's, it was a need, it'll always be a need. How do you tend that part of yourself so that you can mature these wounded places to then actually be able to show up and support other people and to bridge these connections and to, actually realize your dreams? Like, what does your support system look like? Who's your team of people?
Mm.
Like, who do you lean into to feel connected with, to feel seen, heard, met, all those things?
I think our friendship has been a
Mm,
massive part of that.
mm,
Absolutely.
mm,
Having you as a brother that you can hear the hard things, you can help me chew through different big challenges, or when I'm utterly feeling like shattered and those messages or those phone calls of like I can't do this. This is too hard. I want to give up. I'm terrified, I'm heartbroken, or any number of examples that could come up through those things. I just lost everything, or whatever it is. And so that one bridge has been so powerful in my life, and the way that you use your care and your big heart and attention to really listen to what I may have to say, and whether I'm spinning out or terrified or having a big win, like it can all be met, and then we both
mm,
get to grow from it as well, and vice versa. So yeah, really healthy masculine energy, where
mm.
we can give each other accurate reflection. And I
Yeah.
know, big parts of my life I didn't really get that.
Mm,
That wasn't something that was always met, especially in like close relationships.
yeah.
And so that's been a game changer, where if I'm spiraling in some way and you're like, wait a second, like I do see these pieces in you. I do see that you're doing this and this and this. And you're like, oh, yeah, holy fuck. I was being so hard on myself. I was
Mm,
tearing myself apart. And you've given me like a lifeline of maybe that's not true.
mm,
Maybe I am okay as a guy, as a
mhm,
human. Maybe I am actually doing good work in the world,
mhm,
because doubt is going to be a part of our lives in all kinds of capacities, and big fears or insecurities. Like that's part of the journey for all of us in our own way. And so there's that. I've done a lot of somatic therapy. That's
mhm,
been huge. And I started doing a decent amount of counseling like years and years ago. Maybe it was 15 years ago at least. And that was kind of the first, elements. And I started reading books about nervous systems and
mhm,
started reading about all kinds of different ways of looking at the body, partly through the vehicle of wanting to be a really good clinician, a good doctor. But we can apply all of these things towards ourselves, and then getting those different reflections and new viewpoints, leading to a bit of a breakthrough. And then I'd follow that rabbit hole. I've and Tony Robbins, we're both fans of Tony, and
mhm,
been to different events and taken in some of that material. And now, especially the last 10 years, like tons of podcasts, lots of learning around how do we develop? What is attachment theory? Because I like to understand things mentally as much as I can while I'm doing the deeper emotional or physical work. And then, sort of in an interesting paradox, way more solo time the last like 4 or 5 years. And not that I wouldn't be like in relationships or relating, but where I'm actually taking time by myself, hiking in the forest, running in the forest, going to hot springs, like camping
mhm,
solo, where it's just me and the trees
mhm,
and the dirt, and connecting with nature, because I feel so connected to the natural world that way,
mhm,
that actually like it's funny, right? Like taking way more alone time has actually been so healing for the aloneness feeling. So I can be by
mhm,
myself way
mhm,
more now, but still feel very connected to self and this planet and energy,
mhm.
because I know that it's there. And so I'm going to carry on doing that, because I feel like there's even more for me to discover in that. more solo time, more alone time. Let's like bring presence into that. And then, with the deeper aspects of feeling better about me just as a human, like accepting myself more, that brings all of these other parts of me, the younger parts, into better connection. And then I can also bring that to you. I can bring it, I've got some other really beautiful humans in my life that I can share deep fears with or challenges, and we get to move through it together.
Mm,
Because definitely in the past I wouldn't really reach out for help. That was a big challenge for me, to ask anybody for anything at all.
mhm.
And then I realized as I started doing that, it helped. Like,
Yeah.
oh, wait a minute, actually there is people that care about me and love me, and it just seems crazy that I would ever even imagine that that wasn't true, but that was just my inner
Mhm,
experience, even with really loving people,
mhm.
that it's my own story. And so emerging into the world and opening up more, then it started to teach me it is actually good to ask for help, and asking the right people for help, and still being mindful and discerning of like who
Yeah.
you're sharing with and when, and following that timing or intuition. And then breakthroughs would happen, and beautiful reflections would happen, and it would completely change the trajectory of maybe something I was experiencing, and I'd come out the other side, and then I'd be able to offer that back, to many, many other people, and I'd become a better clinician, better doctor, a better listener, a better friend, all of those different things. And it was often through a lot of painful places, but then, connecting back in, facing those things that you're most afraid of. And so, yeah, you've helped me a ton
Mm.
to move through a lot of those, as we call it, like the shit sandwiches, right?
Yeah, I love that you definitely brought that in, and I love it. There'll be a moment where I'm like, "Ooh, I'm really in it. I'm like in my shadow. I'm beating myself up, and then yeah, reach out and Kev's all over it. Yeah, man, I love shit sandwiches. Let me chew on some of those with you, and just how supportive that's been.
Yeah, carrying it together,
Oh my
don't have to
God.
hold everything on our own.
Yeah, thanks for speaking in that because I just really wanted to, for our listeners, I feel like what can happen a lot is this projection of people in this, in the lamplight. Like yeah, it's easy to project, like, oh, they've got it all figured out. They're so confident. They just, had it so easy growing up. And I really appreciate you sharing a bit of your journey of like, it's not all easy. And like without layers of support, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
This is what I love about looking into your world. This is how I live my life. And this is how I love, this intersection where we get to be this, you know, how I experience it in my body is like Kev for me is a primary attachment. He is a dude that my nervous system feels so fucking safe with that there's nothing I can't bring.
Mm.
And that layer of support is so helpful for me to process all those tender places that do need to come up and mature and evolve. Like I'm a man, I'm also human, and all my wounded places express as really young, immature parts. And so getting to bring those parts, be seen, not judged, also held accountable to like, showing up in different ways, given the felt sense from another man who's actually living it too, like getting to lean into those qualities, activate those in me. It's like, oh, I get to show up as more of an actual man, not just in my physical stature, but also like in my behavior, my emotional intelligence, my contribution to humanity and relationships. And so I'm just really glad that you laid out your support system because God, and I know you, there's so many more layers even on top of that. And it's really important to highlight that because this projection that can happen of like, oh, well, they just, came from money or they just have this gift. And it's like, no, often, how I keep seeing it is like, when you go into these leaders and influencers' life and you look at behind the scenes, they're really supported.
Yeah.
There's mentors, there's books. It's like, I know for both of us, it's like human design and gene keys and, you know, our good friend Peter, who's a Gene Keys reader, like looks at our profile and gives us insights. Like there's all these layers. It's for me, it's somatic therapists and coaches and
Hmm.
spiritual guides, and we've had like psychic readings and like going. It's so like using astrology. Like there's all these different tools, and then like what I really see in your life and what I really feel in my life, and this is why I value our relationship so much. It's like one of the most meaningful relationships in my life that's worth tending and caring for is how much that relational support and consistency and development over time is needed to be able to show up in life and lead. Like there needs to be a like
Hmm.
falling into to be able to like emerge out into the world and offer more.
Yeah.
And I haven't met anyone who's been able to contribute to humanity in a good way without being really loved and supported in some way in the relationships that they have in their life.
Well,
Mm.
this clip I remember of George St. Pierre, UFC fighter from back in the day. Somebody asked him, "So what do
Mm.
you eat?" And is it this and this and this? And he
Mm.
looks at them and he's like, "Do you think a Formula One car uses regular fuel? Like,
Mm.
you really need to attend to the level of performance that you want to perform at." And
Mm.
so in the health world, health and wellness, certainly like diet is a big key. But again, being in nature, being in the mountains, having really close brotherhood, other, massages, acupuncture. I've done
Yeah.
so much of that over the years. Great body workers like craniosacral therapy, neurofeedback. I've tried and done many, many different things because I love learning, I love experiencing. But I also know if I want to operate at a high frequency and have a huge impact in the world, I have to support my system on all of those levels. Like
Mhm.
you can't just, kind of silo some of these things and ignore them because the body will break down quickly
Yeah.
if you're being regularly supported. And I think that's something that's made a huge impact is doing more of that over the years because I didn't always do a lot of it. I'll just be giving her, you know,
Yeah.
making it happen, push through, willpower, all the rest. And, when you start bringing in support for each of these levels, it actually unlocks the next ones for us as, leaders or guides or, people that are supporting other people. We need as much or more support to be able to do that.
My God, so much so. God, I want to keep going on this conversation and mindful of time. So before we end, thank you all for tuning in and listening. And thanks, Kev, for coming on and sharing your story, your journey a bit more with us. And I know that you've got, an event, you've got all kinds of offers. So you can share, the floor is yours. You can share all the offers you got. And, the one I'm curious about just putting out in the field for those tuning in is, that new human event that's coming up. And
Mm.
yeah, anything you want to speak to there for people who are listening who are new to new to Kev and want to start following what you have to offer, how to, yeah, what do you got coming up and how do people follow you?
Well, I'd love to make regular coach time here with you.
Yeah.
Part of the part of the journey.
I'd
Just
love
two
that.
guys hanging out talking. Yeah, thanks. So the new human, yeah, it's a big group event, a healing event that we started last year, 2023, and we did two of them. They went really well. We learned a lot. We healed a lot of laughs, a lot of crying, crying energy in such a beautiful container, beautiful
Oh,
way, and in the Okanagan and Enderby at the First Nations Community Center there in Enderby, the Splat scene is just beautiful, kind of weaving in more connection and more relationships that have been just continually growing and fostering more care and more healing on every level. And so that's something that feels really inspiring to me to keep following. My heart keeps saying, let's do more. Let's keep growing this. Let's bring more connection. Of course, my heart would
yeah.
want to say that. And seeing the impact of people in one room flowing together at a high frequency and continuing to raise that frequency, it's been really beautiful to see how many connections have come out of that for a lot of the people that have been there. And it just
Yeah.
propagates out into the world more and more. And we have a lot of fun doing that. And so we have another one planned for this October 2024. And we'll be announcing some of that stuff soon, depending on when the podcast comes out here. And I've got some speakers lined up that I think are going to be very impactful, people that I've looked up to for years, and weaving in like a really beautiful balance between the masculine and feminine energies, and being able to deliver things that are going to touch the heart and soul of everybody there,
Mm.
and that everybody generally that comes is met where they're at.
Mhm.
There's something there for you if you're interested in growth, healing, learning, creating more love, connection in your life, creating more vitality. That these events are on that wavelength, and I think the guidance that came through to call us the new human was because I believe that's where we're going, but that's also what we can create in our reality now is by doing it.
Yeah.
So it's not just a fun experience, even though it can be great, that we do a lot of practices and share things that can land in your bodies and your nervous systems that you can carry forward after that, that have like a tangible effect in your life with your friends, your loved ones, maybe your own mission, maybe your own, pathway, that it creates some fire in your belly to share something more, to share more of who you are authentically in the world. And yeah, we get to model that as best we can in our own humanness. It also feels like a very grassroots event, that it's real. There's nothing maybe that's too out there, even though there's a lot of magic. Like it's actually rooted in our bodies, rooted in our humanness. And I feel like that's part of the new human energy, is being human
Yeah.
with all our insecurities and coping mechanisms and patterns that maybe don't support us anymore, that we're still allowed to be welcome in a room where we're not perfect, where we have issues, but that is a common thread, that yeah, maybe everybody has felt alone in that room at times, and then something happens and maybe they don't feel that way anymore, and it sparks something new. So really excited to continue that flow. And I've got a new group healing experience that we do online called the Vitality Collective. That's been going really well. We're going to be doing more of those, and detoxes and all kinds of things. But being supported in a new way, in a different way, where we're working on the physicality through frequency, but we're also working on the mental emotional pieces too, so that we're unwinding it all at the same time, which is really always what I want to get to. Is that's how you can get like root source
Yeah.
tangible shifts that are lasting. It's not a temporary impact. So yeah, these are some of the things I'm excited about. And yeah, speaking at more events coming up, and I'll be in event in Calgary, MYM, and that'll be at the end of May. And yeah, so many exciting things. 2024 feels like big energy, lots of abundance and expansion and opportunity if we're in the flow. And whatever challenges come up, I know we're going to meet those the best we can too. So yeah, really grateful. Thanks for having me on, brother.
Yeah, thanks for being on. And just that theme of what you talked about, going back to the new human too, is just the connections that have happened at the two that have already played out, and the one that's coming is, getting to be a part of this new human movement, getting to contribute to what that looks like by connecting with people who have that same burning desire in their heart. It's like, oh my God, so good.
Well, I'm excited. Thanks for being on stage with us at the last two events too. Anybody
Yeah.
that was there, well, Mike, Elliot, Magic, and more to come.
Yeah, such a gift. Oh man, this has been so fun. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, buddy.
Looking forward to the next one.
Me too.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in. Please remember to give this a 5-star rating, share it on your social platforms. It helps it bump up on the platform so that other people can tune in. Love and appreciate you all.